Good.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for tonight's event with Tom Scharpling in conversation with Julie Klausner, discussing It Never Ends, a memoir with nice memories. Tonight's event will end with a Q&A, and to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. If you see a question on the list that you'd like for our speakers to answer, you can click the like button and it'll bump it up in the queue. And we'll try to answer as many questions as time will allow. And please also feel free to continue engaging with each other in the chat. We'll be hosting more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn more about them on our website by signing up for our email newsletter, as well as following us on social media at Book Soup. And you can follow us right here on our Crowdcast page to get direct emails and notifications of when we're going live as well. Our next event is tomorrow, July 8th, with Rosecrans Baldwin and Steph Cha, discussing Rosecrans' new book, Everything Now, Lessons from the City-State of Los Angeles. And past events are also available on our YouTube channel. Also, please support Book Soup and our author tonight by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book, which you can do by clicking the green button right below the viewer screen. It'll redirect you to our website where you can complete the checkout process, and it'll open in a new window so it won't interrupt viewing, and you can do that at any time. And we have signed copies, so don't miss your chance to get a signed copy from Tom. And we're also open for in-store browsing, so if you're local to Los Angeles, please come say hi, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day, and we'd love to see you. So with that said, let me introduce our guests for this evening. Tom Scharpling is a comedian, television writer, producer, music video director, and radio host. For 18 years, he has hosted the weekly radio call-in comedy program, The Best Show with Tom Scharpling. He is also known as the voice of Greg Universe on the hit Cartoon Network animated series Steven Universe. Previously, he was a writer, executive producer for the Emmy Award-winning show Monk. Other guests tonight, Julie Klausner created and starred in the Hulu series Difficult People, produced by Amy Poehler and starring Klausner and Billy Eichner. She co-hosts the podcast Double Threat with Tom. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the camera over to Julie and Tom. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation. And thank you both so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you, Samantha. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. I just wanted to open by talking about the last time I was at Book Soup. So if you have children, just like put your hands over their ears for just a quick 2 minutes, because last time I shopped at Book Soup, which I love that, but that's your favorite bookstore, isn't it?
It is. That's my favorite bookstore, number one.
And we're so happy to be here and participating in this event to honor your book, but especially Book Soup is such a great place. And I remember last time I was in LA, I think I was probably either like, it wasn't a destination experience as much as I was just sort of browsing to like meet someone in the neighborhood. And it was like a nice, like sort of quiet early afternoon. And Karen Finley was reading from her book the following poem.
Okay.
Grabbing pussy. That angry cat, make her purr, lion roar, a pussy. I'm one angry cat. It was amazing. She had a couple other bangers about George Bush, and I was browsing, and it was awesome. So I want to thank Book Soup for hosting us and say hello to you, my friend, and congratulate you on your book.
You mean this book?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Show the inside. Show the part that Karen Finley would like, the pink inside.
Now here's the secret part of the book is that if you take the cover off, and then there's my lady friend Julia Vickerman did that. Like
beautiful.
Being long, very sweet. Now, thank you for doing this, Julie. I appreciate it, and I'm so excited. And you're one of the people that was an obvious, massive influence on me, both when it was time to write a book and just overall in general. So it's so nice to have you do this. Is just perfect for me.
So here is the first question, and it's probably going to be one that you anticipated, and so boring. It's so obvious. I'm going to say it in a silly voice.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide to write not just a book, but this book? Because there are other books that Tom Scharpling could and can write. but what was the motivation to write this one?
Well, it's I wanted forever to write a book because you and I both have one of the many things we have in common, but one of the things that we are both book fetishizers and fanatics, where their books are very important to both of us. And I had put so much pressure and just expectation of myself that if I would ever write a book, I would want it to be everything. I wouldn't want to go like your friend Walter White says, no half
chickens. I want a full.
chickens.
I don't want just
Full
the breast and
chicken,
thigh. I want a full rotisserie chicken. No
Yes.
half chicken.
No half chickens. No, but it really was like, if I was going to do it, I was going to go all in on it. And when it was, I thought about it like a fiction thing or some kind of novel or whatever. And it was like, well, I'm not there yet. That might be down the road. But this made sense. And it was like, well, if I'm going to do this kind of book, I just didn't want it to be just a collection of stories. I wanted it to go as deep as I could go with it while still keeping it funny. And that was kind of the tightrope for me, was making sure I told the stuff that I didn't want to tell necessarily, because it's like the hub of the wheel, so much of that stuff. And all the stuff makes sense in a way when I explain things that happened to me in terms of mental health and all of that. Like, then I feel like the other pieces click into place when that is explained and kind of explored.
So just specifically, you have so many funny stories, and at the same time, you wanted to challenge yourself to be vulnerable enough to talk about the context of these stories and the person who was sort of struggling to get where he needed to be. Did you have a rule with yourself that said, if I'm going to tell this funny story, it needs to connect to this bigger picture goal of being vulnerable, of showing, these things that I may not necessarily be comfortable talking about?
Mm-hmm. Like some things did, some things I knew where it's like, oh, well, this will be important because it reflects back to stuff I went through, and it'll be a good kind of like embodiment of that. But there were other things where when I started telling the story, I didn't realize how they did connect to certain things. Right. When I started, like the new Monkees, for example, yep. Which is this godforsaken chapter in the book that truly a true low point in a life peppered with some really embarrassing moments, was me at 18, basically auditioning for the new Monkees. But and that, to me, in my mind forever, that was just a standalone story where it's just like, oh, here's a dumb thing I did. But then when I thought about like when I did it, and it was like, oh no, there was context for this, and it had deep roots to the stuff I was dealing with at the time, which just kind of recovering from some pretty severe mental stuff. So it was like exploring that stuff made me realize how everything was connected ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, also like I know that's not his real name, but the Mr. Morris story, which is just a home run, especially if you want to talk about it in terms of dunking on a guy who's in a bad place, but at the same time, the way you write about it, that's not your intention with it at all.
No, I mean, basically, it's a story about a shop teacher that I had in high school who got drunk at school one day and drunkenly taught a class that I was in, and it was maybe the greatest thing I've still ever seen to this day. But yeah, and I mean, look, I'm obviously having fun with the ridiculousness of that story and the craziness of all of that, but I also tried to put it in the context of where I was at that point, and just being like, man, look, I was not in much better shape than this dude. But it was, yeah, it was really eye-opening to see to kind of pin myself down for where I was at mentally at certain points, and to find that through line through all of it. It was really a very surprising experience.
Because I think there are stories that people from the best show know, but they don't necessarily know why they are stories that you keep going back to. And part of that is the context. And another part of it has to do just with memory.
Oh yeah, because I have, my memory is shaky due to treatments that I got when I was, in the past, and it really has affected memories for me, and it has affected my concept of memory has been affected. Kind of like the idea of I realize what a memory is, and I realize what it's like to not have a memory, that I know there are these enormous blank spots that are just, they are gone, and I cannot access them. And if I go and I look at photos, or I look at a yearbook, or I go look at family photos, talk to my mother, whatever, it still feels like I don't have a hold on them. It feels like I'm constructing the memories. They don't feel like they're truly mine.
I think a lot of what is so successful about this book is to to almost take back that power and form these memories in a new way. Even by writing about them, you're kind of regenerating this story in a way that belongs to you today. I almost wonder.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It really is. There's a lot of reclaiming and claiming, and kind of making this the record of my life, and just saying no, I'm putting it down on paper, and I'm owning all of it. And then I get to move forward from here, having said that this is where I'm at. And it's this book is basically the first almost 50 years of my life. And it's so it's I kind of look at it as the first in a trilogy. The first one will be this, and then the second one will cover till I'm 100. And then the third one might be not the longest book, but it'll cover from 100 to 150. And it's also a real treat to catch a glimpse at the chat and see somebody while I'm talking about this stuff writing Chiku.
Walter Be Bad.
Most horrible things that ever happened.
No, it's great. But here's the other thing. What I also appreciate so much is that, I think with comedy right now, being transparent about mental illness is, in some ways, there's less of a stigma, which is terrific and wonderful. In another way, I'm almost worried it's a little trendy. And I'm not concerned about you and I not being mentally ill in 5 years when it's out.
Oh,
but
when I was working on it, I'm seems like this mental illness is really gonna be
ride the wave.
There's gonna be a boom market for this boy. Boy, oh boy, do I have. Yeah, I think I'm sitting on a gold mine.
Right. That said, there's a lot that there's a lot you can do, period. But there's a lot that you can do that other people who are very honest and vulnerable and transparent can't, which is just be extremely A+, top of the line, funny jokes wall to wall. And I don't think, I'm seeing people say I didn't know that about you, but in a way we all kind of did, because it doesn't clash against who you are. It just gives more context. You just see a little bit more of the big picture, but it all makes sense together, especially when you talk about, going on mic and talking about things and making them funny as a way to transcend shame instead of, pack it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for the funny part also, because my goal really was, it's just to just be funny first, but I didn't want to be dismissive of things that happened to me in the name of being funny, to where I'm just cheapening stuff or minimizing things. I wanted to own it all and own it honestly, but I did want to find a way. It's just like, I need to keep this book funny, even when it's not maybe the funniest arena in certain chapters. It's like, let me find a way to be funny as I can be with it. I'm going to do whatever I can. Cause that was the goal. Cause there are books that people write, memoirs, and they're serious memoirs. And it's like, that's great. And there's comedians who've written memoirs that are not particularly funny because they were pouring their heart out and talking about their life. And it's just like, I understand that completely. That's a road to go down, but I just didn't want this to not be fun. For me, I knew it's like,
not an option. It's not an option.
Yes.
Well, here's my other thought around it is that, like, you have been a writer for so long and you do the best show for so long, but this is the closest thing that's just completely in between. And how did you kind of capture what you do on the best show, voice wise, storytelling wise, while also being true to things that you haven't talked about on the best show before?
It was funny because it's like the books that, like, seeing how everybody who was known for something other than writing first, when they would write a book, I wanted to see how they got their voice into things. I mean, it's like, I look at what you did with your book, and I mean, the biggest one we talked about, and like Adam Resnick, I looked at what he did with his book, Will Not Attend. But the one that I kept going back to, that I read twice it's a book I had read twice already and then read 2 more times while writing this book, was John Waters' Role Models, because it is clearly him saying this to you, but it's not him transcribed into it's not just like they rolled tape on him and he talked and then that was the book. John Waters definitely wrote it, but he found a way to get his voice on a page so clearly that when you read that, you're like, there's nobody other than John Waters that could write this. And that was like, that was a huge challenge, because I had never written like that before, especially to this degree, where it would be like, no, I need to kind of host my own book. But I didn't want it to feel like it was just like, oh, I just went to Fiverr and transcribed a bunch of best show things and then handed that in as the book. I wanted it to feel written, but I also wanted it to feel like it was me writing it, and that it was kind of conversational and like I'm hosting my book.
Speaking of role models, that's such a great example, because that's really the book where John is like introspective about things that he wishes he hadn't done, like idolizing the Manson murders in some ways. And he gets very introspective about, gee, that was what I was like then, and that was a little weird. And he talks about being gay in a way that you kind of hadn't seen him, and in a way like
he's gay.
Oh, Tom.
I did skip 1 chapter in the book.
Tom. I'm so sorry to have to break it to you. I'm so sorry. At least you're learning it from me.
Yes.
But it's almost like you skipped you're like, the books he wrote before that, that's your radio show. You don't need to like rev up to that. You can go right to the like, no, I'm dealing with the tough stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And his thing, the way he talked about, him talking about the Manson, I mean, that chapter, that extended chapter, it's like a 30-page chapter.
Yeah.
Where he talks about
Patricia, right?
Where he covers Leslie Van Houten and his whole, he basically is discussing this woman who he became friends with, Leslie Van Houten, who was in one of the 2 houses when she was 18, and she's in jail, and he never says that she shouldn't have been in jail, but he's just saying she's been in for 50 years now, and but he's exploring all of it, including turning it back on himself and being like, I fetishized and glorified this stuff, and there was such a ugliness and evil to it, and I regret turning something that was so painful for so many people into just snarky comedy. So it's just seeing how he really is like a reporter in that way.
Right.
It's some of the most brilliant writing I've ever come across.
And like you, he says, Sharon Tate's family, I'll buy you a soft pretzel. I'm sorry. And if I see you, I'll buy you a soft pretzel.
Yeah, that's what I try to say. I'll buy people soft pretzels. I'm going to have to buy a fair amount of soft pretzels coming up, I think. That's one of the promises I made.
Is Mickey Dolenz really a bad drummer? That never once occurred to me.
Yeah, I mean, he just wasn't a trained drummer. He was kind of...
that I knew. But I mean, like, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Well,
really?
You just did it.
Yeah, that's true.
You just did it. That was not the hardest thing. You're not a drummer, and you just literally did what he did on the record.
Randy Scouse kid.
Yes.
What is the book that you would have written before? And by before, that can mean whatever, because I know that there were like some events that came into you sort of saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this in this particular way. Your dad passed away very suddenly. There are some things that went into it, but I also wonder if there's another version of this book that's like kind of shittier, or if there was one that was floating around your head that you were just like, nope, I'm not going to dive in on this because it's just not the right book.
Well, for this book to be the book took forever for me to finally be ready to do the book. But I thought about other things that would have been more kind of like, more just basically inside the best show and just do the thing almost from as if the me that hosts the show is the voice of the thing, and not like me, the complete me behind that person. Because I mean, it's I'm not doing a character when I host the show, but it's definitely like, it's performative, like anybody doing a thing. I'm trying to be funny, and I'm trying to host a show, so you can't be your true self, or I might just be like mumbling and saying I don't feel like talking today, which is a case that I could, like, if it's the real me, that's as much of a chance of getting that person as the one who wants to host a show. So I did think about earlier down the line that maybe it is a show about the best show and the world of that, but it always felt like it didn't feel true enough in terms of what I wanted to do with it. It still would have been me dodging stuff from my life and not putting it in. And it would have been, it would have felt like, well, I wrote a book, but I still didn't write a book. Like, I wanted this to be like, this is it. And I can stand by this, and I know what's in it is what happened, and I'm pouring it out. So, yeah.
I know that I don't want to keep dwelling on the like how, but like you do say in it, I finally come to a place where I can share my story. And I just wanted to know, what are some of the things that went into that? And I'll have what he's having.
No, it really was so much of the stuff that I never talked about with anybody.
Just building up.
And it really feels like the thing, like it's in where you can't run from it after a while. You're carrying it. You just might not acknowledge it, but you kind of tamp that stuff down, and it doesn't go away. It just starts coming out in worse and worse ways until it comes out to where you're sick. It would have made me sick if I didn't address this stuff and kind of unburden myself with it.
And there's so much in here about fear, guilt, and shame that just sort of seems to be like the overarching thing, whatever the whatever the actual story is, that's the thing that you're dealing with, not running away from, but just dealing with in the act of writing about it.
Yeah. No, it just was facing it down. And I can just say from doing a fair amount of therapy, it just got me finally to the point where I was ready to even see if I could face this stuff down, because it only grows and grows, and you realize that it's growing because I'm not tending to it and I'm not addressing it. So it just grows on its own. And
right.
And then there's just that point where like, no, I can face this. I can, it's not 100 feet tall and I'm just a child against this enormous thing. It's like, no, I can stand up to things that happen to me. And then you realize they're not as big as you might have thought they were. Even if they still are big, they're not as big.
Secrets grow in darkness. They, like, what is that? Like sunlight's like what is that called?
Sunlight's the best disinfectant.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Oh wait, there's more?
What are you drinking? Did you switch over from oat milk nitro to like
I killed this.
What are you doing? What are you up to now?
I'm also doing some competitive soft drink drinking contests.
Well, you were very upset that Joey Chestnut won again. I know he's your old rival.
Yeah.
And he's our next mayor. Did you know that he won the Democratic primary?
That is so it's going to be Curtis
Mayor Chestnut, Sliwa versus Chestnut.
Imagine the debate of Curtis Sliwa and Joey Chestnut.
Yeah, and then afterwards he empties his beret and there's all those hot dogs that he didn't eat and he's in so much trouble. You
just realize he was full of hot dogs, undigested hot dogs. He opens a panel in his chest. Hot dogs fall out.
Oh, instead of a bomb, like with those sticks, it's like hot dogs. Like,
yes. No, he's. Now I'm gonna throw up. So.
Well, join the club. I'm going to ask you. Oh, by the way, everyone watching, first of all, hello. Thank you for joining us, and send us questions in the thing, and I'll look at them while we're chatting.
Mm-hmm. You have to give credit to the person who said Joey Chest panel.
Thank you, Rachel. I know that's Rachel. I know Rachel. She's great. It's got kitties. Mm-hmm. Hi, Z-Man. So I wanted to ask about, and this is something I know that you're probably thinking about too, but like, what is a post-book best show, Tom? And how do you continue to compartmentalize while also integrating what you've put out there as a public figure?
You want to know what's so exciting, is that I have literally no idea. I honestly did not worry about it. I knew things will change. However they change, or whatever that looks like, I'll figure that out. But right now, I don't know. But I didn't care. I didn't want something like that, some kind of imagined fear, that thing where you almost make up a person that you're trying to not change for or whatever, to get in the way of me just doing this. So
well, it also kind of seems like something you can figure out as you go, because you've never been shy shutting down callers that are overstepping their boundaries, whether it's about stuff that you feel comfortable or talking about, or just stuff that you just don't feel like having on the show in that moment. But it doesn't mean that the book is off limits in the same way that it may or may not be part of the, mythology or the iconography of the show. But that's just in your hand as like a mood to mood kind of basis, I think.
Yeah, and it's exciting to just be like, well, let's go somewhere. Let's see what adding this to the mix means for the show and for my life and all of it. Like, there's nothing to be gained by me holding back on this stuff any longer. So let's just see what, and if it's just like, well, what's that going to look like? It's like, I don't know. And it's like, well, aren't you worried about it? It's like, I don't know. I really don't. I think about like when Mark Jacobs got all ripped, and then he started getting all these tattoos, and then he got like the M&M characters on his arm, and then somebody was like,
"What are you gonna do with those?"
Yeah, they're like, "Well, aren't you worried about if you regret that?" And he's like, "Well, I don't regret it now." He's like, "Maybe if I regret it down the road, then I'll figure that out. But I don't now. I wanted it now." So it's like, he's like, "I'm not going to not do it based on the chance that I'll regret it later." And that's something that has kind of resonates with me. The idea of just like, it's not an actual, you can't like you can't not do something based on the potential of future regret.
There's also a world in which you just don't talk about it on the best show, and it's out there, and everyone just has context for what you do on the best show, and you just do it exactly as you've always done it. And
absolutely,
you don't need to talk about your family on the best show, which you don't, but you do in the book, and that's
absolutely
completely like what you were saying about John Waters. It's like that guy, whether he's writing a book, whether he's doing a live show, whether he's speaking to the very handsome Bill Maher, you know, like he's always the same voice, and that is you in different you know, media, I guess.
Absolutely. And it's exciting to have new elements and things to maneuver through and navigate. That's exciting.
Yeah. Now, am I concerned about your Noid tattoo? Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's huge.
Well, you're just going to have to avoid the Noid tattoo.
I'm going to check in on these questions. They better not be any silly ones.
They're better. I'm telling you, if there's a silly, I'm out of here. If there's one silly one.
This is a good one. I like this one a lot. This is from John. Was there ever an instance where you found yourself nervous writing about something because you knew someone specific would eventually read the book?
Oh, yeah. No, I had countless versions of that. It just was, yeah, I mean, I was worried about my mother, my sister, just my mother was honestly number one with it, because she, I just didn't want her to take any of the stuff as any sort of me complaining about her. It's just like, no, it's life. She did an insanely great job raising me and helping me through my life. And I didn't want her to take the fact that there were struggles and problems in there as some sort of anything about her. It was. And that was number one for me, was that.
I remember when I first wrote my book, people were like, have your parents read it? Have your parents read it? Did people in it read it? And I remember thinking that was kind of sexist. Not that no one's asking you that. It's always a thought. But I remember when it came out, everyone seemed to be like way more concerned about the impact of the people in it. Someone is asking, what is floating on the ceiling above?
It's a ceiling. Head? It's not nearly as dramatic as it looks.
And also, I just wasted a question because I only have 4 questions. No, I'm just kidding.
And Christopher, you're right. You should be, those Get a Life headlines, you should be jealous of those, because those are the original Wallet Boy newspapers from Get a Life, courtesy of the aforementioned Adam Resnick.
Can you guys talk about punching? Oh, well, this side will answer. Well, these are the answers for both of us. Well, one of them is for you, but I'm going to answer it anyway. There's Jimmy. What are Tom's favorite pinball games? I'll answer that.
Funhouse. Adam's Family.
Adam's Family. No, what are yours? And then I'll tell you mine. But you know mine.
Yeah, no, it's really, I like Funhouse. I like Adam's Family. I like a lot of 70s ones. Pre-electronic ones I love, like from early to mid 70s. There's one called Flash that was kind of like one of the first electronic ones that was so exciting. I love that. Yeah, I like Family Guy Pinball Machine is very good.
What is it? Does he say, Lois? What's the exclamation there?
Well, what he does is he says, remember the time you played a different pinball machine, and then you play a different pinball. Then the machine changes into the old machine that you played.
Someone is asking, I will mention the name of the person because that will be nice for me to do. Tina says, can you guys talk about punching up versus punching down in comedy and whether your own difficulties play into that? And I think you talk about this as far as, I mean, it's such a cliche. I kind of hate this expression of like hurt people, but when you're bullied, you talk about being in high school and how you have all of this shit that you end up just directing internally and also towards your friends because it has to go somewhere. And then we're also touching upon like a certain amount of regret or feeling bad for, you know, picking on people that didn't deserve it. But I think the question is like, how do you figure that out and what do you do going forward, I guess?
It's been a constant effort. I think I'm much better at it now to where I don't take things nearly as personally as I used to. And you realize you're not in direct competition with literally everyone doing stuff as much as it feels like that sometimes. It isn't. And it's just like, you just have to take care of your own side of the street. And that takes care of most of it. And you just realize it's like when you've got the ability to kind of be funny, to write jokes, to just do that stuff, that there is a responsibility that goes with that, where you just don't want to use it to hurt people, and you want to use it to hopefully make people laugh and feel better, not worse. No, it's a very
it's tricky. Right? I do. It's tricky, but the other thing that makes me anxious about punching up versus punching down is that people who are not in comedy got a hold of these comedy terms, and they're like policing us in a way that I find very strange sometimes because it's kind of that like everyone's not just a critic, but everyone's a comedy critic, and the answer is if it's funny, then it's fine.
Absolutely.
And it won't be funny unless it has some sort of you're on the right side of things quality to it, which is not something you can define. It's just you either know or you don't.
Yes, and you can make mistakes and you figure that line out. And the whole point is that I think the point is that you're trying, right? And nobody's going to be perfect with it. But I think if people are trying and they're willing to admit it's just like, well, I overstepped this, I missed the target on that, but they're trying. That's all you can do is to honestly try and to just realize who you're aiming everything at, and
right.
And it's just like, yeah, I mean, I know it's like at this point, I know when I'm punching down. I feel it immediately, and maybe I didn't always feel it immediately, but now I feel like I have a much better kind of detector for that.
Yeah. No, I hear you, Tina. I think it's like I think that like it's definitely something that you just sort of know. There's no rules. It's just a gut thing, and you have to sort of feel, oh, that kind of felt weird, or that kind of felt mean, and just to make sure that you're not being a complete jerk about things.
And you also have to live not live in a closed circle to where you don't meet people that aren't exactly like you, and then assume that anybody who isn't in that closed circle is somehow wrong, or it's like, no, they're just not you, is what it is.
I was curious as to how people who are not from New Jersey are reacting to the New Jersey stuff. And people that aren't familiar with you from the radio show. I know the book only been out for 24 hours, but I'm curious about the responses of people that maybe are not in our little tiny insular world.
Yeah, no, it's really been positive. I mean, people will obviously are just like, yeah, you definitely talk about New Jersey in the book because that's where you grew up. But yeah, everything's been really positive. I've been very happy with how people are kind of roll with the idea that it's like, all right, well, it's clearly you telling your story, and it's going to be surprisingly specific in spots. but accepting of that, because it's just like I just wanted it to be my thing, but also tap into stuff that is everybody's thing at the same time.
Yeah. Let me see. Some of these questions are silly. I'm telling you guys right now, these are silly questions. How influential was Michael Caine's autobiography for you? That's silly.
Wait, what was that?
How influential was Michael Caine's autobiography for you?
Oh,
writing It Never Ends from God.
In terms of
It's
thank God for
silly. I'm not saying it's a bad question. It's silly.
Thank God for dark brown trousers.
Also, why couldn't they have been black? It's so grossly specific.
It's so gross.
He's wonderful though. We love him. Susanna wants to know, how did we meet and what was the first book that the two of us bonded over? I don't know what the first book that we bonded. That's a good question. Do we know that?
That's a really good. I don't know if there is a first book.
We've lent books to each other.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I've given you books. You've given me books. But we met at WFMU. You came up as the guest, or what would you call it when you came up? Were you?
I don't know what I would call it. I did a bit with our mutual friend Andy Earls at the time, and I was just so in love with you, and I'm still in love with you, but I was and am still your biggest fan, and I was listening to the best show on WFMU, and I had your cassette tapes, and I was just such a fan. So to be able to meet you, let alone go on the air with you, was just like huge.
And that was for me. I said, I don't know if I said it to you. I mean, I knew it when I watched you do your thing on the radio for the first time and talking to you. I was just like Julie is like a heavyweight and like a comedy heavyweight. Like I could feel it the first, like I just could see the way you were thinking. I was like, oh my God, she's so incredibly strong that it's just like, it's just like, it's her world is what I honestly, the first time I felt like that watching.
I was work. Thank you. I was really nervous. It was like auditioning for Lorne Michaels.
Yeah. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said.
Lorne Michaels, Paul Simon, Paul McCartney, and Steve Martin at Le Cirque. And I was a funny waitress. No, I remember because then you said like Worcester texted you and said nice things, and I was like, oh,
absolutely.
God.
No, it was just like, it can be so, because radio can be very intimidating when you're new to it, especially because there's no response on stuff. There's just like,
I only had an audience member of one,
but that's exactly it. You only get, there's only one person.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're used to performing in front of people and getting that immediate response from an audience, when you might say the funniest thing you've ever said and it's silence, and you just have to own somebody's laughing out there. You just have to trust. It's just like, I know that was funny. That has to be enough right now.
Well, I like that as a theme in the book too, is your just unwavering confidence that what you were doing and what you and John were doing was funny, no matter who knew it. You had, you talk about being fearful, you talk about being self-doubting, you talk about turning the screws on yourself, but you have this, unmovable confidence at being funny, which if anyone knows you and has a half brain is completely founded. It's almost like me being sure that I have a cat. I have a cat. He's right over there.
Yeah.
No, but in the same way that
because the cat was just right here.
He was right here. He had pointy ears and everything. But your confidence in being funny and brilliant, no matter who knows it, is immovable. And you said it existed the second that you were on mic. You didn't need to hear anybody laughing. You knew it right away.
But you know what that's like. It's just like we are the same.
Well, we definitely are the same in a lot of ways. The neck stuff is uncanny. The monkey stuff is uncanny. And also, it's so interesting, like you were talking about before, like trying to find context for these stories that everyone kind of knows. Like the Patti Smith story comes from the fact that your dad had just died and you were completely broken to pieces. The Monkees thing, it was important to you because you were recovering from what someone in the chat is talking about in terms of like a mental injury because this country doesn't pay for healthcare because that's from Dougal, that it's like, as a Canadian, it struck me this is a story of a family and an individual crushed by the failures of the US healthcare system. Absolutely. There are things that exist that lurk behind the bit that wouldn't make us so passionate about this stupid stuff if it didn't connect to things that are not stupid at all.
Absolutely. It's just like, I'm so grateful that I know I have one thing. It's like, I feel like I know I'm a nice person and I know I'm funny. And it's kind of like, I think that might be enough. Like, I'm so grateful that I have those two things.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris in Sacramento wants to know, what is your process for writing in general versus how you wrote the book? And were you disciplined? Were you focused on deadlines? And I'm curious process wise with this specifically because you do so many different kinds of writing. Were you approaching it like chronologically? Was it something where you just say, all right, we're starting from junior high and ending it till today? Or how did you kind of break that up?
I kind of tried to be, I tried to break it up for myself, and I popped around where I'd be just like, okay, I wrote a long chapter now. What's a short one I can write while I get my head ready to write the next long one? So I would think about what that could be and try to like break it up in that way. And I would, there were certain ones I would put off writing, like a lot of it's funny because when I wrote the proposal for the book, I had to write 3 chapters. One, and I was like, well, let me put something together that represents the range of what I do want this book to be. And I wrote the Billy Joel story, and then I wrote about getting picked on. And so the Billy Joel story is just funny. That's just like a standalone funny thing. High school.
It connects to being, like freaked out and school and not really having a place, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. But it could very well just stand alone as just like a funny essay. I could strip that down to just being about the comedy, and then it would have been that. The writing about high school, getting picked on in high school was still funny, but had like some heavier things starting to hover over it. And then writing about just like mental health stuff and hospital stuff was just straight up sad stuff that I tried to make as funny as I could. So I figured those covered that was like the spectrum of what I wanted to put into the book. So I kind of had those taken care. Like I saw the range of what I would write, and I'd be like, oh, well, this one will be more like the hospital stuff. It'll be heavier. Well, let me write a couple light things before I get to that. Or so I really tried to bounce around, and then I had a vague running order in my head for the book that I was constantly kind of playing with the chapter order through the process. But it kind of held. I really did know where I wanted the book to play out. I knew how I wanted it to play out. And I even said it on the Best Show years ago, where I would just say, I'm going to write a book and it's going to go like this. You're going to laugh. Then you're going to start crying. Then you're going to start laughing again. And I said that years ago. Yeah. And
very bossy emotionally. You were like, this is the emotional recipe. This is what's going to happen.
But the thing is, I didn't know if that would actually work because having never written a book.
Right.
But it certainly seemed like a plan. And then there was a moment when I was putting the thing together and working with Christopher, my book agent, and where it was like, I think this works. Like, I think this order works. And I would ask him, it's just like, this works, right? And he was like, yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like kind of like, it was such a relief to see that this theoretical plan worked in reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone is asking about the unshakable confidence, if it's developed intentionally or if it was just sort of always there with the knowing that you're funny and knowing that you have something to say.
Part of it just feels like it showed up and it's just a thing I got, and but then I've cultivated it and worked at it. But I didn't it wasn't like I was at zero in terms of being funny. I was always like a funny kid, and that was always interesting to me, whether it was I would prank phone call my grandfather. And
your prank calls are, I feel like we're being robbed out of a prank call album.
That'll be my terrible second book. It'll be called
Prank. That's not a book. That's
called
an
Prank
album.
Patrol.
You can't call a Jerky Boy CDs a book. You just can't.
No, it will. It's a book.
I know you will, but you can't.
It's a book with a CD in it and no writing. No, I loved prank phone calls were such an early way for me to express my I would prank my grandfather and say I was calling from the fire department in the town and that there was a problem because just
your dad's dad.
I would just say you had your dogs they had dogs. I'd be well, the fence you have for the dog isn't regulation and just and then then I'd go a family dinner and my grandparents would be just he prank called me today and he had me going. I'm telling you, he had me going. It was such a funny thing.
We tell the George Harrison story.
Oh yeah. Well, that was by the time I'm in high school now, I'm just going over friends' houses and we're flipping through the phone book, figuring who we could call. So then I saw Harrison, George in the local white pages. And I was ding, 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 here we go. So it's probably 2 a.m. It's awful. I know. Call this guy, probably a weeknight. And he picks up. He's hello. I'm oh yeah, is this and I'm doing my old my adult voice. I'm oh yes, is this George Harrison? And he's yeah. And I was is Paul McCartney there? And he just goes please don't do this. And I was I am so sorry. I'm sorry, I apologize. Sheepishly hang up. That was the beginning of the end of the prank phone calls.
I really like this question in the chat that talks about how quickly you assess how some best show callers are a little different or has different, I guess, needs of to why they're calling, or maybe they're a little stranger than others. And how do you assess that so quickly? How do you give them space to talk? How do you sort of figure out so quickly how to interact with them in order to make the show, as great as it is?
I think part of it is just letting people set the tone a little bit for what I'm going to do with them. And I kind of follow the caller's lead early, and I can kind of get the lay of the land for who they might be, who if I know them or don't know them. And yeah, it's just been it really is the kind of thing that I just want anybody to be able to call up and talk, and we'll find some common ground where we can just get a conversation rolling. And
yeah,
but I kind of try to follow the caller's lead. And it's also just been an interesting thing because not everybody has the same voice or the same it's just everybody's different. And there was always the risk of that somebody was doing a voice and doing a character, but maybe that's somebody's voice and that's them. And I didn't want to ever, I would rather look like, oh, you pranked me, you got me, if somebody was doing a voice rather than to preemptively do something that would make somebody whose voice was not, like a conventional caller voice.
Yeah.
I would rather just figure that out and let somebody figure out who somebody is and then have a conversation with them, and just rather than be in some sort of preemptively judgy thing doesn't work. And that's one of the things that over the years you grow on the show with, and I'm glad it's one of the best parts of it. It's just that was a part of the world of the show. It's just like anybody can call, and it's not going to be like there's no such thing as like a normal caller.
Right.
That's just like everybody who calls is a normal caller.
Yeah.
And we're all normal and we're all not normal, and we'll figure it out. So
yeah. And then I'm going to ask one more question from the chat, which is, do you have any plans to return to New Jersey? I say you could take the guy out of New Jersey, but that guy's going to be in New Jersey.
Look, I mean, I'm living in LA. That's where I live now. But I'll be back at some point.
You can't take the New Jersey out of the guy.
You can't take me out. I know the pizza that you guys love so much. No, I'm kidding. Of course.
I talk about pizza.
No, of course. I love it, and it will always be who I am. And it's there. I couldn't get rid of it if I wanted to, and I don't want to.
I just wanted to congratulate you again, and also, I mean, I don't know. It's surprising and not surprising. I'm not. It's just more of what and who we already know, and the compassion you have for these characters in your life that changed your life so much, even in ways that not seem very positive at the time. You extend so much grace to the people that you write about, and I'm going to repeat it just because it's worth being said. I think people might dwell on the vulnerability and the gravitas because they don't expect that from you, but I'm just going to repeat the fact that no one's funnier than you, and that, I mean, this isn't even about joke ratio. It's just about point of view, and you can't punch that up. You know what I mean? So when you're telling these stories, it really is like having the company of the friend that you already have listening to your voice every week, kind of sitting by you and giving you just sort of more of what you already love. And I think it is just such a resounding success. And I congratulate you, my friend.
Well, Julie, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I love you so much. And it just wouldn't exist if you were not a part of my life.
No, I'm proud to be a part of your life. And thank you for everyone who has joined us and buy the book at Book Soup. And I think there's going to be more signed copies, Samantha. Is that true? That we are in no way limited to the amount of copies that we have because Tom has not broken his fingers yet?
Drive over and sign more. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Just don't wait so that we can have them all together for Tom to sign at one time. But yeah, thank you both so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for being with us at Book Soup. Thank you everyone for watching us from your home or wherever you are. And definitely click that green button if you haven't yet. If you don't get it tonight, you can always come back to booksoup.com or come in person and get a book.
And buy Karen Finley's book too. Buy Karen Finley's book. She used to do extraordinary things with yams.
Buy Julie's book.
You can buy my book too.
Yes.
And listen to Double Thread and The Best Show and buy another one of Tom's books. You've been listening to us for so long. It's time to buy the second one.
Yes. And thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you to everybody at Book Soup. It really is my favorite store. I love going there, and I'm so honored that this gets to be a part of all this. I get to do something with my favorite store.
That's so nice. I'll pass along the love. That's really sweet. Thank you so much. And thank you both. It was an honor, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
everybody for coming. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.